This is Holy Faith Media.
Joe Pasillo. Everywhere.
Make America great again.
And we love it. And we love it.
Come on, man.
Attention.
Get ready for this.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the front line with Joe and Joe.
Oh, yeah!
Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. And once more, dear friends, we are going way into the breach.
Later, he gets the rebound, passes it to the man, shoots it, and boom goes the dynamite.
So all I got to say to you is this: boom! Boom! And once more, dear friends, let us go into the breach. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. Sunday night, and we're live. All right, we're live on Facebook. We're live on YouTube. We want to thank Jonathan Ross up at Holy Faith Media, because we're also live on all Holy Faith Media pages, whether they be on Facebook and YouTube. We want to thank you all again for joining us here. We have a great conversation for you tonight, a conversation that we feel fits right into what we are trying to accomplish here at the front line with Joe and Joe. We are going to start with the election. Okay, to let you know, we want to give some folks out there a chance to join the conversation, because even though the election is very important to talk about, we want to focus on some very powerful statements coming from Archbishop Vigano in a preface that he wrote in a book that we'll tell you about. And also, so you got Archbishop Vigano on one side, all right, in the obviously a prince of the church, and a Catholic layman, a faithful Catholic layman that we're going to talk about, Jim Caviezel. Great actor, played, as you all know, Jesus in Passion of the Christ. Jim Caviezel had some very powerful things to say on Fox News that, again, fit right into what we're doing here at the front line with Joe and Joe. We want to amplify what Jim Caviezel said, and, of course, we want to give you the Joe and Joe breakdown on the things he said. And when we get to it, we have a couple of other things newsworthy that we think all of you good people out there should know about. So before we get started, just remember, please follow Joe and I on Facebook and YouTube at The Frontline with Joe and Joe. Like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Also follow us, please, on Holy Faith Media. Follow Holy Faith Media itself. There's a lot of great lineup on Jonathan Ross's site, and you'll love all the content there. And having said all that, let's talk a little bit about the election and what's going on.
This is a big week. Now, first of all, what is Trump's legal team trying to do? They're trying to influence public opinion. Why is that? Because in about a week, it's scheduled, I believe, for the 14th, so they have 7 days starting tomorrow. The Electoral College is going to meet and award their votes to a candidate. So what is Trump's legal team attempting to do? They're attempting to influence the public. You see, they don't have time to go through in many of these states the court cycle. So what are they doing? They're influencing the public. Why? Because the public influences the legislature in those particular states, and it's the legislature that awards the electoral votes for a candidate.
Let's get that straight. Not the governors of the states, not the Supreme Courts of those individual states, the legislatures of those states. That's according to the United States Constitution. It's there for a reason.
Absolutely. Now, and we've said this on shows past, if 3 of the swing states do not award their electoral votes, that is the decision of the legislature, Joe Biden does not have 270 votes. What would probably happen at that point, if that was to happen, it would go to the Supreme Court. And then they would make a decision. Because that, I don't believe, has ever happened. I could be wrong, but I don't believe that has ever happened.
But just to cut Joe off for a second, but remember something. If you don't, think along these lines. The Democrats knew this because they knew they were cheating. They knew it could go to the Supreme Court, and what did they hammer Amy Coney Barrett on in her testimony?
She had to abstain.
They wanted her to. Are you going to recuse yourself if the election goes to the courts? No. Go kick rocks, Dick Durbin and Dianne Feinstein. I'm not recusing myself. Did the left ever recuse themselves when decisions that were coming in front of them that would have affected the Obama administration? Did they recuse themselves? No, they're not obligated to recuse themselves in any way. But the Democrats were signaling it could get to this point, and that's why they were trying to bully Amy Coney Barrett, who's unbullyable, into saying, oh, yes, of course I would recuse myself, which would never happen, all right? That's what they're afraid of, is that all of this, A, will go into the House of Representatives, in which case Biden loses, or go to the Supreme Court and have a solid 5-4 conservative majority come down on the side of Donald Trump.
And then it would go, as Miscellaneous said in the chat room, then it would go to the Congress, and then Donald Trump would win. That would be the chain of events. However, what I want to focus on right now is this. Do you know that before the election took place, because a lot of people say there's no evidence. Well, clearly that's not accurate because there's 1,000 affidavits signed. 1,000.
More than that, I think.
Which means that a person is saying that this happened and I am going to go to jail. So the term that's being used now, it's not like widespread fraud. That's
right.
What they're basically trying to say.
It's just little fraud, but little fraud.
And that's acceptable.
Right, of course that's
because
acceptable.
Because it's not going to change the outcome of the election.
But that's a lie when you look at the math.
Well,
when you look at the vote differential in Arizona, in Georgia, okay, in Wisconsin, okay, there's 3 swing states right there. When you look at the vote differential, you say, oh, well, actually, yeah, if you throw out 200,000 illegal votes, well, that's going to swing the election for Trump because Biden's only ahead, according to the fake vote, the stolen vote, by 10 or 15,000 or 20,000. So it will have an impact on the outcome of the. You're not looking to throw out 1,000 votes, but Biden's ahead by 200,000. You're looking to throw out 200,000 votes, and Biden's only ahead by 10,000.
Well, you're
that's
looking
the
at
rationale.
100,000 votes across 3 states swings this whole election. That's it. Very, very small amount across 3 states,
Right.
100,000 people.
Yeah.
But what I want to focus on is this. Because a lot of the reason why the recounts did not produce a different effect, and a lot of the reason why there isn't hardcore evidence, meaning like outside of the affidavits, meaning like outside of what they're couching as it's not widespread fraud, is because there were 300 lawsuits waged pre-election. The majority of those lawsuits were waged by Democrats and their allies. What was the object? Force all mail elections or huge increases of absentee ballots, simultaneously eliminating safeguards against abuses and fraud. I want you all, after the show, Google what Jimmy Carter and Baker, what was
James Baker.
had to say about absentee ballots, a study that they conducted.
A bipartisan study.
And
Or
they
I
are
should say,
Democrats.
a nonpartisan
They
study.
said that mail-in ballots are susceptible to fraud.
Right.
Okay.
Because they are.
Now, what did these lawsuits, pre-election lawsuits that the Democrats waged on these states, do? They got rid of voter ID and witness signature or notarizing requirements for absentee ballots. They overrid state deadlines for absentee ballots to either be returned or postmarked by Election Day. They voided state laws banning vote harvesting by third parties, as well as stopped or eroded signature comparison procedures.
They basically took away all the safeguards.
So, there is no question. I am a former auditor. I was an auditor for 15 years in banking. There is no question in my mind that if you did a signature verification, you will flip a large swath of these votes. There's only a 12,000 vote difference in Georgia. Now, this is what I want to point to, and I want you to think about this objectively. Take off your partisan hat if you're a Democrat. Look at the metrics. We always say that there are metrics that matter. Look at the metrics at the rejection rate of mail-in ballots for this election. It is smaller than all other elections that used mail-in ballots historically. How could that possibly be when the number of mail-in ballots for this election cycle is exponentially greater?
Right.
Why? Because of what I just said. It was pre-election lawsuits that removed the safeguards. So they did a recount. They counted the same bogus crap.
And then the media obviously trumpets that and says, well, we did a recount. Again, there's no evidence. There's no evidence. That's what they're going to do when they have a willing media. Miscellaneous. Welcome to the show, by the way, Miscellaneous. We don't know who you are, but we're glad that you're here. John, let's get on this real quick, because this will be a topic that we'll be covering, not John Roberts per se, but in our next couple of segments, we're going to be talking about Archbishop Vigano, and we're going to be talking about Jim Caviezel, about making choices, okay, in particular, is going to be one of our topics. John Roberts is a guy who's not making any choices. You posted correctly in the chat room, John Roberts is now irrelevant. Just like all people who are sitting on the fence, who think that they are sitting on the fence. They are increasingly becoming irrelevant. They're going to be forced to make choices. But you're right about that. The other thing is, yes, it is election fraud. You're correct. One thing I want to mention and why I'm bringing you up, Miscellaneous, you said Trump was waiting on the mail-in ballots. Remember something from the very beginning when they laughed at Trump, when he turned around early on and said, Obama spied on my campaign, and the media laughed at him. When the media laughed at him, well, now what do we know? Obama spied on the Trump campaign. We know that. We knew the whole Russia thing was fake. Trump was well ahead of them on that. He was well ahead of them on all of this. You might be right, Miscellaneous. Trump might have had people watching because he knew what they were going to do. They constantly have underestimated this guy. Constantly, okay? And they might have underestimated him when it came to this election. They're going to get burned, or I think you used the word cooked, because, again, he's just shown himself to be much more way ahead of them than they want to acknowledge.
And keep this in mind, too. Again, it's about influencing the legislature through pressure being put by the people. 53% of all voters in Georgia feel that there was fraud in this election. Overall, 70% of Republicans feel that way and 30% of Democrats. So this is not a small minority of people that feel this way. Believe me, don't listen to what the message that the media is being put out there. Like, no fraud, no one feels this way, you're being foolish. That's not. If you look at Rasmussen, if you look at other very reputable pollsters, these are the stats that are coming out. Why are they important? Because the people who are elected in state legislation want to keep their job.
Right.
And if they feel that the people are behind them, they just may not give those votes to Biden. They may say we're abstaining.
Well, not for anything. If we're right, okay, we're not just being hyperbolic when Joe and I say on this show, Donald Trump won this election in a landslide. That means that those people in those counties and those districts that vote for those state legislators, okay, if those people are not satisfied that the Republican legislators they voted for are going to fight with them and for Donald Trump, guess what? They're going to lose their job anyway. So as Joe started the conversation by saying the public pressure on them is important because, listen, if they're afraid of the left, they're going to be out of a job if those people that voted for them feel that they were let down. And that's just the way it is. And Gio's in the chat room. He said, why is it, triple question mark, so I guess you really want an answer, Gio, people hate Trump so much? Gio, thanks for joining the front line with Joe and Joe, because that's a question that we've answered a lot of times on this show. I don't care, and Joe doesn't care whether or not people like the answer, okay? But we have our what I think is a substantiated opinion on why people hate Trump: abortion. Abortion. Nobody wants to hear that. Now there are other reasons, deep state and all that, okay? Abortion is the reason that they hate Donald Trump, or at least they have to pretend to hate Donald Trump to try to discredit him because he has the authority under the Constitution to put judges on the courts, on the bench, in the federal judiciary and the Supreme Court, and he's been putting on pro-life judges. They hate him because of abortion. Gio, to answer your question, back in 2016, or in 2017, had Donald Trump nominated Merrick Garland and judges like him to the Supreme Court, Donald Trump would be, in their mind, one of the greatest presidents of all time because he was with the Democrats on many things that they should have worked with him on: criminal justice reform, trade, wages, workers' rights, all these things that are tariffs, all these things that are generally Democrat positions. Donald Trump basically took the side of the working man, took the issues from the Democrats. So what reason did they really have to hate him? It has to be because of judges. And they hate that because they need to keep their precious, diabolical sacrament legal, namely abortion. So that's our opinion that we think is a correct one, Gio. They hate him because of judges and because of abortion. It's that simple. So we want to thank you all. Did you have any other comments on that?
No, but this is a big week, and I think a lot is going to come out. Couple predictions. I do think that Alito, who has the case from Pennsylvania, I think he's going to rule in favor of Trump. He's already showed his hand. Also, something to keep an eye out for. 22 voting machines have been turned over in Michigan to a forensic audit. That should come out within 48 hours. Also, in Georgia, they are calling for a special session in their legislature to question giving the ballots, not give the ballots to Biden.
And remember, go ahead, Joe.
No, but so basically, this is a big week. A lot to watch out for. Sadly, you're going to get none of it on the mainstream media. You have to go to other sources.
Like the front line with Joe and Joe.
Or dig a little deeper. Go to Twitter. You can find a lot out there.
Follow Steve Bannon.
Absolutely.
America's Real Voice. And you can follow Bannon on YouTube at the on the War Room Pandemic. Joe and I are on the Crusade channel. Very important. We'd like all of you to follow and hopefully subscribe to the Crusade channel. Joe and I gain nothing from it. financially. We have a 3-hour show on Mondays. It is a subscriber-based network, but Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. We would recommend going and doing the 30-day free trial subscription. Mike Church has excellent commentary. So does his whole lineup on all of this and many other issues that are of importance to us, not just as Catholics, but as all people of goodwill. So we would definitely ask you to go to crusadechannel.com and check that out. There's a couple things going on. Remember, you're following The Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. Please like, subscribe, share on YouTube and Facebook. Share everything with your friends. I do want to give a couple of quick shout-outs, and I apologize. We have many people watching us right now. Ed, C. Gerard, Dana, Miscellaneous, AJ's in the chat. Carlos basically is saying that down in the Rio Grande Valley, they almost turned it red, and there's Trump signs all over the place in Mexican-American neighborhoods. I would just go, before we segue, just 5 seconds, Carlos, just to say, we mentioned it last week. Remember what the Democrats have done and what we said over a year ago, that they would do to Hispanic Americans if they started voting along the lines, because they were more informed, okay? If they started voting along the lines of their Christian and specifically Catholic values, namely abortion and gay marriage. 40% of Hispanics voted for Donald Trump, okay? Mainly, in our view, because of those judges, because they agree with us and because many of them are Catholic and Christian on the moral issues like that, okay? Obama turned around and said Hispanics, A, enabled the racist Donald Trump. That was their first sin. And B, because he didn't use these words, but what he really was saying was that they have these arcane moral views when it comes to abortion and gay marriage. So guess what? Expect, as the Democrats vote more and more for this new Republican Party, because it is a new Republican Party, Joe, I think you would agree.
Oh, without a question.
Okay.
It'll never be the same again.
Minorities, working class people, everything that we want Catholic. That's another thing that we want our Republican Party to be. More predominantly Catholic in its view, okay? Hispanics are going to turn more and more to the the Republican Party, and the Democrats are going to start vilifying Hispanic Americans, okay? So you mark our words on that. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Michael's in the chat room too, Caps, Miscellaneous. So we want to talk about...
Aldo's in the chat room. Longshoreman, love it,
right,
from New Jersey.
Working man right there, longshoreman. You don't get harder working than that. So you're at the front line with Joe and Joe. Archbishop Vigano, he has recently written a preface for a book, okay? And we're going to get into it because these comments in this preface are very powerful. They fit in with everything we do here at the front line with Joe and Joe. They're worth talking about. Joe, where are we headed?
Basically, as Joe said, the book is called Gratitude, Contemplation, and the Sacramental Worth of Catholic Literature. It's a collection of essays by Dr. Robert Hickson. And as Joe said, he wrote the preface. We want to talk a little bit about some of the things he had to say, because I do believe he is somebody who speaks truth to power, has been now for about 2 years. We want to explore some of the excerpts. This is what he had to say. He said, "Where the deceiver lurks, the eternal truth of God must be obscured in order to make room for the lie, the betrayer of reality, the denial of the past. Memory is a fundamental element of people's identity, civilization, and culture. A society without memory, whose patrimony consists solely of the present without the past, is condemned to have no future. This amnesia affects all social classes and is not the result of chance, but of a systematic work on the part of those who are the enemies of the true, the good, and the beautiful." Joe, didn't we see that this summer when we see people trying to erase the past of America?
That's exactly right.
This is what's going on.
People need to understand. They say, well, why are you Catholics always talking about politics? Well, if you don't think the devil works through government, then I don't know what to tell you. And the government involves politics. And in this case, when you're talking about whose politics in particular, you have to go to who has been the most stalwart enemy of the Catholic Church for, I think, the last 150 years. And that is the international criminal organization known as communism. And it is an organization. It's not just a bunch of ragtag Bolsheviks looking to overthrow the Tsar. This is an international criminal conspiracy that has its target squarely on the back of the Catholic Church. Why is it so important for us to talk about it? Because a Catholic leader, Archbishop Vigano, has his target squarely on the back of international communism and what they're trying to do. What is he talking about here? Okay, the erasing of the past? Of course they want to erase the past. Do you think they want to remind Catholics of our beautiful past? He actually mentioned this in the preface too, okay? No, they pick out things that they want to vilify the church. They leave out all the good. Everything else they erase. Look at what they did going back to pre-communism, which really is the root of all this, which is the French Revolution. The first thing they did was kill clergy and religious. Tens of thousands of clergy and religious were killed. It was an anti-clerical movement, an anti-Catholic movement in France. They slaughtered 250,000 Catholic French in the Vendée. But what did they do on a cultural level? Erase the past. This isn't something new. It's deliberate. Archbishop Vigano is pointing this out. They have to erase the past. They don't want you to know about the past. Memory, you mentioned memory and the amnesia that they're trying to impose on us, okay? Because a people without a past is a people without a future. Those who want to control your life don't want you to have a future. Why can't people get that through their heads? These are not people who care about the poor, Joe Resinello. They're not interested in equal distribution of wealth. They're interested in power. Power for themselves. When you know the past, when you can recognize the enemy, when you fight against the enemy and their diabolical ideas, you're a threat to them. That's why they need to erase you eventually.
But they can't erase the past. It's been tried and failed.
Well, they do. They're really trying. Let's put it like that.
Well, this summer was a disgrace, and we allowed it to happen. Frankly, it should have been stopped, if you ask me. These governors are a disgrace that allowed that to happen in this country. An utter and absolute disgrace. They call themselves American. It's disgusting. This country is lost. Half this country, I don't even know what you're thinking. Mm-hmm. In all honesty.
Right.
I don't even know what you're thinking. Or are you thinking? Listen, nobody is perfect. You pick anybody that there's a statue or an idea. No one is perfect.
Well, you're talking about the statue of a human being. So obviously you're gonna have someone. If you want to find the sin, you could find one. If you put Saint Augustine up in a statue, okay, Saint Augustine would be the first one in his autobiography to tell you about his sins. You're not going to find perfect people. But that's not what we're looking for. If you want to find perfection, go sit in front of the Eucharist for an hour, okay? Because that's where Jesus is, and he's the only person who was ever perfect, okay? But the thing is, they need to do this. They need to tear down the past so that they could create a new future. See, if you're informed by what they'll call old ideas, but what we would call true ideas, okay? Or what Vigano and the church calls the good, the true, and the beautiful. When you're informed by that, okay, that's going to be the way you live your life. That's going to form your worldview. They can't have this. They can't have you thinking this way. They can't have you thinking that contraception is a mortal sin. They can't have you thinking that abortion takes the life of an innocent human being. They can't have you thinking that marriage is only between one man and one woman. This stands in their way of dominance. This isn't conspiracy theory anymore. 15 years ago when Glenn Beck was talking about the New World Order, it was conspiracy theory. Now they're telling you they want a New World Order. Everybody, Joe, what's everybody out there talking about right now? Everybody's out there doing videos about what? The Great Reset. It's there. They're telling you about it. Justin Trudeau just said that. There's a clip of him online talking about using COVID for the Great Reset to get our environmental policies through and all the other diabolical ideas they come up with. But fighting them requires you to remember your past. That's what Archbishop Vigano is talking about here. Knowing your past, understanding your past, understanding the beauty of it, okay? And that's what the left can't stand. That's what, unfortunately, a lot of leftists in the church can't stand. That's why he's become an enemy to a lot of these people.
Well, as Vigano said, God must be obscured in order to make room for the lie, the betrayer of reality. You see, you can't. listen, call it whatever you want to call it. Man has his hour, but God will have his day. These type of movements never last. It's historically proven. Communism didn't last 100 years in Russia. The Khmer Rouge did not last, and this won't last. Sadly, they're going to cause damage, and that's why we have to fight against them. Sadly, people have to look at reality. Sadly, most people nowadays, they don't base their life in reality. Mm-hmm. They build their life on rationalizations. To be honest with you, some of the thoughts and the ideas that are being put forth, gender, ideology, recreating oneself that goes against all ideas of science, destroying children in the third trimester.
Can I cut in there?
Sure.
Listen to what Vigano says about right what Joe just said, all right? And think about what he said about destroying children in the womb, okay? Vigano says in this preface that he wrote, and by the way, the book itself, I think you mentioned Sacramental Worth of Catholic Literature. It was Dr. Hickson's wife, Dr. Makey Hickson, who wrote an article about this, okay, for LifeSite News. Vigano goes on in the preface to say, never, now follow this, guys, never has falsification reached the point of such incomprehensible perversion. Now remember, we said they tried to do it during the French Revolution. Soviets tried to do it to a degree. The Khmer Rouge really tried to do it, okay? But he's saying killed so many people. Incomprehensible perversion, Vigano says, and is evident that the desire to artificially create such ancestry is the necessary premise for the barbarization of the offspring, which is now practically accomplished. Look at what Joe just said about slaughtering babies in the womb, okay? We have such a barbaric offspring, and what I mean by that is not kids nowadays, us, because we're the children from 50 years ago, in the time that Roe versus Wade became legal and supposedly safe and rare in America, which are both lies, okay? But it certainly did become legal because of a Supreme Court decision, okay? How barbaric is this culture that we live in? When you just take that alone, you could take so many other things, okay? You could look at the way pornography is rammed down everybody's throats, and we're going to talk a little bit later, if we get to it, about the education system try to convince 5-year-old boys that they're girls and girls that they're boys, and that's all barbaric, okay? But you think about slaughtering babies in the womb to the degree that we have in the last 50 years, that's the barbarization of the offspring. And he's saying that it's been practically accomplished because it has. It has. I mean, when you look at the face of somebody who Ed is in the chat room. Let me comment on something because it's going to dovetail into what I was just saying. Ed says, "I have sinned in what I have done and in what I have failed to do. I'm guilty of these sins. I sit in my house while others stand on the streets praying and ministering to others." Ed, my message to you, my brother, our brother, is it's never too late to get out in the streets and pray. I didn't start doing it till 2 years ago, and I'm 53, okay? So I was talking a whole good game for a very long time. But now once a month, I make it my business with my wife to go down to Planned Parenthood in New York City and go and witness and pray the rosary with other prayer warriors for all those babies that are going to die in the womb, okay? But the reason why I bring that up is I wanted to mention that to you because there's always time to take to the streets and pray the rosary. We got Father Justin Senante on a couple weeks ago. During COVID, he put the Eucharist in the back of a pickup truck and drove it through the feet, Philadelphia?
No, New Rochelle,
New Rochelle, New York, okay? You could always take to the streets, my brother. My point is, you see the barbarism on people's faces when you see this desire for sexual liberation, which is manifested in their desire to keep abortion legal. Because guess what? Sexual liberation as a revolution takes a very big hit if abortion is declared illegal in America. It's going to just go down dramatically. You're not going to go out and have sex right away if you think you can't kill your baby in the womb. But my reason for bringing it up is how barbarous, Joe Rossinello, are these people. We've seen them in our face mocking us while we're praying the rosary. Ed, it's diabolical. To all you good people out there, Vigano's exactly right. This is the offspring that has been barbarized, okay? Because what you think about what they're so angry about is somebody would have the audacity to say that you can't kill your baby in the womb. And they get angry at that. They want to kill you because of that. And like Joe and I always said, if you think they won't kill you, look at what they do to babies in the womb and then ask yourself that question again.
Let's go on to what he had to say, Vigano. He said, the absence of beauty is the necessary counterpart to an absence of holiness. For where the Lord of all things is forgotten and banished, not even the appearance of beauty survives. It is not only beauty that has been banished. Catholic truth has been banished along with it. In all its crystalline splendor, in all its dazzling consistency, in all its irrepressible capacity to permeate every sphere of civilized living. How true that is.
Yes.
They're not interested. They're not interested. They basically say your religious liberty is you can practice your faith in your house. You cannot even vocalize what your church believes. You cannot say publicly that you believe in traditional marriage anymore. Can't do it.
Could lose your job.
Even if you say, well, listen, I'm Catholic. That's what my faith espouses. Or I'm Jewish. That's what my faith espouses. We believe in a traditional marriage. Marriage is between a man and a woman. It's basically, that's it. That's what the faith believes.
Right.
And here's the thing. That is the church's belief. Meaning it's not yours to change. It's not. Sadly, this idea of relativism is just everywhere. We determine what the truth is.
But here's the thing. Do they really believe that? Because remember something, and this goes back to Pope Benedict XVI when he talked about the dictatorship of relativism. It's always relative. So it's like all truth is relative. Well, the people that say that don't accept our truth. Those when we say marriage is between one man and one woman. So I guess truth isn't exactly relative. The only truth that's relative are the truths that they tell you are relative. But if you say something that's, let's say, is supposed to be considered relative truth, they'll say, no, what you're saying is not right.
And they're not having it.
And they're not having it. But in the meantime, they're the ones that say there's no truth. They tell you you're wrong. They tell you what you're saying is a lie or is not truthful, while at the same time, they deny objective truth. Now, you have to be a calculus whiz to try to wrap your brain around the arguments that they try to make. They're inconsistencies. They're illogicalities, okay? Because it doesn't make sense. Relativism itself doesn't make sense, but it sounds good. It makes people feel good. It's my truth, Joe. It's your truth. It's your truth. So everything is just, it's whatever the truth you want it to be, except the truth that actually is the truth. Except the beauty that actually is beauty. Except the good, which actually is good. See, it's always got to be perverted. The Catholic Church contains the good, the true, and the beautiful. Everything that they talk about contains the evil, the lie, and the ugly. And they pass it off as being good and true and beautiful. That's what's so diabolical about it. What's even worse is that so many people believe it.
Well, here's the thing.
And we can't understand that.
What I would say is this. You could disagree with us, and there's many people. Our videos are starting to get around, and I'm sure,
Thanks to you.
Yes, absolutely. But if people listen to what we say and they say, you guys are just crazy. What I would say is this. You tell a tree by the fruit it bears. I say this to people all the time. I say it to my wife. I say it to people in my family. I say it to my friends. Is it working? Are all these ideas basically producing a healthy society? Look out your window. You don't have to look far. Is it working? You see, I'm going to be honest with you. I could look at my uncles, my aunts, and people in my family. Married 50, 60 years, raised families, owned houses, worked hard, saved money, raised kids. It was working. You see, your ideas aren't working, and they're not going to. I'm going to tell you that straight up and down. You cannot build a society on these ideas.
No.
You might feel good in the interim. Long term, you're not. You will not build a healthy society on these ideas.
Because they're lies.
And they are.
They're lies.
And if you don't believe me, you know what it's like? It's like a father looking at his 15-year-old son chasing after nonsense. He knows what he's doing. And he also knows that it's going to amount to nothing. Nothing. And that's what this is. It's going to amount to nothing. You're building your house on sand. And ultimately, it will collapse. You see, this is, even in the short term, if we take a little bit of a beating, and we just might, long term, you're not going to be around. We'll out sweat you, just like we did with the Romans.
Mm-hmm.
We took a beating for 300 years as Catholics. Guess who goes to the Colosseum on Good Friday to do, what's it called? What do they do? The Stations of the Cross. The Catholic Church.
That's right.
That's where Catholics were killed for 300 years.
There's a big cross in the Colosseum. You've been there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a big cross when you walk into the Colosseum, right there. That cross, that tells, now this pertains to what we're talking about. At that time, that cross was considered the symbol of Roman power. You disobey us, you don't bend your knee to the emperor, you will go on that cross. Okay? That cross, okay, is sitting there right back in the face of all the powers in the Colosseum at that time where all those Christians were killed. And it's the same thing now. We're telling all those people, let me tell you something, I like to break it. I mean, this is where Joe and I get a little kind of like Nork about it and kind of bring it down to a street level. You all think you're tough guys out there. All you leftists, all you communists, you think you're tough guys, right? You're all tough, you know what I mean? Antifa, Black Lives Matter. We'll burn down your building. We'll hit an old man over the head with a bicycle lock, okay? The thing is this, what these people need to realize, but they don't have any humility, so they're not going to realize it, okay? You will never, ever be as strong as Nero was. You will never, ever be as strong as Diocletian was. You will never, ever be as strong as Joseph Stalin was. You'll never, ever be as strong as Adolf Hitler was. And none of those people and any other tyrant, none of them were able to defeat the Catholic Church.
And you
none
won't
of them,
either.
And you won't either.
Like I said, you'll have your hour, but God will have his day. You're not students of history, and this is again what Vigano is saying. You're trying to erase the past. You cannot.
Right.
You cannot. And you cannot build society based on these ideas.
But is it a society that, or is it actually a good society that they want to build? Or as they are, and we think they are, many of them are diabolically inspired. They don't care about society. They don't care about anything. They get happy when they see, when they destroy those things that other people hold dear. Things that they would hold dear if they would allow the scales to fall off their eyes. But they're so blind and they're so immersed in their evil of abortion and perverted sex and sexual liberation and drugs and everything else that they don't want to see the good, the true, and the beautiful. So those who do have the good, the true, and the beautiful, they want to take that away. That's the fight. And that's why we're all going to have to make choices, okay? Because we're not surrendering. We're going to have to make choices. Do you have anything else you want to comment on that?
I want to say something what Dr. Hickson had to say, because I think it was very good. This is obviously, Vigano wrote the preface to his book, but this is a good book. And this is what he had to say. He said, "We are called to the commitment to recover the life and full memory of the body of Christ, even if in our eyes we cannot do much to rebuild the body. But the Lord does not ask us to perform miracles. He invites us to make them possible, to create the conditions in our souls and in our social bodies so that the wonders of divine omnipotence may be manifest, to open ourselves to the past, to the memory of God's great actions in history, is an essential condition for making it possible for us to become aware of our identity and our destiny today so that we may restore the kingdom of Christ tomorrow. And we will. It's a lock. It's a lock.
Mm-hmm.
We have already won. Christ resurrected from the dead. People have been tortured. People have been killed in the name of Jesus Christ. And it doesn't stop, and it never will. You know, way back in the day, when they when they did crucify Jesus Christ, there was a Pharisee that went to, it may have been Nicodemus. I'd have to double check that. But he basically went to, like, the leaders of the Pharisees, and he basically said this. He said, if these men are from God, there is nothing you can do to stop them. But if they are not, it will die all on its own.
And he turned out to be exactly right. And who that was Gamaliel.
There you go.
And
he
that
was
was
the teacher of
He was
St. Paul.
Paul's teacher, a very learned man, because you could tell from that statement. Now, what did he do, by the way? It's funny that Joe mentions that. How did Gamaliel appeal to his brothers in the Jewish leadership? By looking at history. You see what he did there? What Vigano's talking about. He looked at history. He says, look at all those people who came and said, I am the Messiah. I am the Messiah. Simon Bar Kokhba and the rest of them said they came, they went. They came, they went. He goes, and if these men are not of God, they'll go too. But if they are, we may find ourselves on the wrong side of God. And he was right.
And there's nothing you can do to stop it.
No, because it's God you're talking about.
That's right. And you can't know what it's like? It's trying to hold back the ocean.
He ain't doing it.
You're not doing it. When the ocean wants to breach the wall, it does. And there's nothing man can do about it. You see, you're not going to win. You'll have your hour. We'll take the blows if need be. But ultimately, you will lose. Count on it. Count on it.
That's right.
Because our will is stronger than yours. Why? Because we have the grace of God. People have suffered and died for centuries. The church is still standing. By the way, it will be the last thing standing on this earth. Everything else will fail. The church is going nowhere, and neither are we. Keep it in mind.
That's right. That's right. And you're at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello. We are way in the breach. You're following us right now, or hopefully seeing us right now on Holy Faith Media. We're on our YouTube page, The Front Line with Joe and Joe. We are on our Facebook page, On the Front Line with Joe and Joe, and a few other spots. Over the next week or so, I am going to try to create a Parler account. Haven't had the time to do it, but I'm going to set that up. This way, I don't know if we could live stream on Parler, but we could definitely share our videos on Parler. We're going to start to take advantage of the Exodus, and one of the ways we started to do that, is I haven't actually. I've always said that I really like Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham, and I do. Okay, I value them. I haven't had on Fox News in over 2 weeks. Might even be closer to 3 weeks now. I watch Newsmax. I watch OAN. I watch The Real Voice of America with Steve Bannon and a bunch of others, okay? And that's where I get my news from. Other than that, I spend my time looking for things to talk about for the front line with Joe and Joe. I would encourage all of you to do the same. So having said all that, we're going to see if we could create a Parler presence, because something tells me that the front line with Joe and Joe would be growing more than it is. All right? I could be wrong about this than it would be on Facebook and YouTube if we were on a real open platform. Okay, like Parler. Parler is actually a real open platform. So we're going to explore that. And the other thing I wanted to say about this week, especially for all you Catholics out there who are interested in the election, we started the conversation talking about the election. The Feast of the Immaculate Conception is Tuesday. Holy Day of Obligation. Am I right?
Yes, it is.
Go to Mass.
Have to.
Have to. December 8th, Tuesday, Immaculate Conception. December 12th, Our Lady of Guadalupe, after which the entire country of Mexico converted to the Catholic Church. In those 4 days, Joe and I think the political world, the political world is going to get rocked a little bit. If it be God's will that Trump, wins this election, if it's God's will, we think it's going to happen where Our Lady's going to have her hands all over that one. And it'll happen between the Immaculate Conception and the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Now, okay, here's what, Archbishop Vigano is, God bless him. He has been saying a lot of things that we need to hear now for the last couple of years, okay? But now we need lay people to step up. Just like we say all the time about the election. All right, let's say Donald Trump is elected. Okay, that's great. We get a little bit of a breather, but what are you prepared to do? Okay? Let's say Donald Trump loses. What are you prepared to do? What are you prepared to do? Why are we always looking to other people? In other words, first of all, we should be doing the things we need to do in our lives to clean up our own house, to get closer to Christ, to get closer to his church, to get closer to the Eucharist, so that we can make the choices necessary. And who's saying something about that right now? Jim Caviezel. Jim Caviezel, a Catholic layman, a faithful Catholic layman. Hollywood actor, sacrificed probably millions and millions of dollars because his big sin for the Hollywood left was playing Jesus in The Passion of the Christ. Okay. He's done well since then, had a TV show, but he could have made a lot more. Okay. Bottom line is this. Jim Caviezel knows what he's doing. Jim Caviezel knows what's right. So we have a clip. Jonathan, you could cue up the clip. It's going to come on in about 10 seconds. We want to listen. We want you to listen. About a 2-minute clip. We want you to listen to it and listen to what he has to say about surrender, okay? About choices and about surrender. So, Jonathan,
one of the
cue
most
that up.
powerful, I'm getting goosebumps now talking about it. One of the most powerful answers I've heard on TV in a long time. This clip is about 2 minutes. Keep in mind, it's in the interest of time, I cut out the question, but it's Pete Hegseth asking Jim about the crisis we have now and the crisis Reagan highlighted in his speech, A Time for Choosing. And it doubles down on what I've told everyone listening to my show. This fight's coming to your door soon. It's already there now. You have a time for choosing too. Here's Caviezel on that.
He said that, and he said, now let's set the record straight. There's no argument over the choice between peace and war. But there's only one guaranteed way you can have peace, and you can have it in the next second. Surrender. Admittedly, there's a risk in any course we follow other than this. But every lesson in history tells us that the greater risk lies in appeasement. And this is a specter our well-meaning Christian liberal friends, our priests, bishops, and pastors refuse to face. That their policy of accommodation is appeasement. And it gives us no choice between peace and war, only between fight and surrender. If we continue to accommodate, continue to back and retreat, eventually we will have to face the final demand, the final ultimatum. And what then? When Satan has told the people of this world he knows what our answer is going to be, he has told them that we're retreating under the pressure of his Cold War, and someday when the time is right to deliver his final ultimatum, our surrender will be voluntary, because you see, by then we will have been so weakened from within, spiritually, morally, economically. He believes this because from our side he's heard voices pleading for peace at any price, or better red than dead, or as one commentator put it, he'd rather live on his knees than die on his feet. And therein lies the road to war, because those voices don't speak for the rest of us. You and I know it and do not believe that life is so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery. If nothing in life is worth dying for, when did this begin? Just in the face of this enemy? Or should Moses have told the children of Israel to live in slavery under the pharaohs? Should Christ have refused the cross? Should the patriots at Concord Ridge have refused to fire the shot heard around the world? The martyrs of history were not fools, and our beloved dead who gave their lives to stop the advance of the Nazis did not die in vain. Where then lies the road to peace? Well, it's a simple answer after all, that you and I have the courage to tell our enemies there is a price we will not pay. There is a point beyond which evil must not advance. In the words of Reagan, evil is powerless if the good are unafraid.
That was powerful.
So now this is what we're talking about all the time when we talk about the need to get in the breach. Jim Caviezel is in the breach. Jim Caviezel is saying the things that are necessary in this culture war. He doesn't have to use the word culture war to let you know he's a culture warrior. Now let's break it down. Couple of main things, takeaways that fit into what we do here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Resinello, talk about a time for choosing.
We all have to make a choice. There is no sitting on the fence. If you sit on the fence, you've already chosen. You've made a choice. And I got news for you. They're going to make you choose.
That's right. That's the main point.
They're going to make you choose. I got news for you. This administration means business. I only wish the Republicans meant business like they do. They mean business. And they're coming to your front door. As basically, Bongino said the same thing. They are coming to your front door.
We've all met people in our lives, okay? Most of us here would be considered in the current culture extremists, okay? We're mostly, all of us, I would assume, we're abortion abolitionists. We want marriage to be defined as only one thing, between one man and one woman. We're not in favor of rampant contraception. We're not in favor of pornography. None of it. Okay, we're all extremists, and all of us probably have heard in our lives from family members or friends. Well, you're an extremist. You're an extremist. I'm in the middle. You ever catch that one?
Oh, without a doubt.
I get so bothered.
How
when
about
people
this?
say,
Joe Biden's in the middle.
right,
I heard that.
Makes me even.
He's a puppet.
Right, he's a puppet of those who are decidedly not in the middle. Okay. But the thing is, how many times have you heard that? Well, you're an extremist. You're an extremist. See, I'm not as extreme as you. I'm in the middle. Well, guess what? Us extremists, all you good people out there, and us, we're not forcing those people that are sitting on the fence to make a choice. You want to sit there, you're going to have to answer to Christ. Fine, okay? But that is a choice that you've made. But what Jim Caviezel is saying is now is the time for choosing because of what the other side is going to do. Because if you think you're going to sit on the fence and disagree with them on anything, they're going to force you off that fence. We're going to talk, if we get to it in a couple segments, about how the Canadian government is imposing just this type of thing on everybody in Canada, okay? But that's what people got to get through their head, Joe Resinello, okay? You're not going to be allowed to sit on the fence, and it won't be us extremists that push you off the fence. It'll be the other side. Because remember something, you want to disagree with us? Go ahead. We're still going to fight for our worldview. We're going to still fight for Christ. We're going to still fight to end abortion. All of it, okay? That's where we are. You want to come off the fence, you come off the fence. You don't, then go with the, sit there or go with the left. But the left will force you. Make no mistake about it, our friends. Make no mistake about it. If now, and by the way, now is the time for choosing. You want to know why it's important that he brought it up like that, about the speech that Ronald Reagan gave? Because all through the last 100 years, we've mentioned Antonio Gramsci on the show several times about the long march, long, slow march through the institutions, the church, the media. Antonio Gramsci was an Italian communist. This is what he suggested. Stalin didn't like it, by the way. Stalin didn't like anything that was slow, okay? Stalin was kind of like right in your face. So I think Gramsci was sent into exile, okay? But Gramsci turned out to be right in a very negative way. He turned out to be right. That long, slow march through the institutions has been going on for the last 100 years. But here's the thing. It's no longer slow, and it's no longer long. It is now right in your face. You're seeing it through individual governors in America like Cuomo. Governor Murphy just signed a law that not only is going to make the abortion law in New Jersey look like the abortion law in New York, he's also going to put in the law that future state legislatures can't undo the law. You think you're going to have to make a choice on that? Okay? Cuomo, Newsom, Justin Trudeau, Macron in France, and all these other oligarchs, okay? Justin Trudeau basically said, we're going to use COVID for the Great Reset. We're going to reset everything, okay? What does that mean? Climate change, gay, so-called gay rights? We're still confused. We don't know what that means. Probably just means that gays have the right to be married. But gay rights, abortion, all of it, we're going to have the Great Reset. You're going to have to choose. Because when they tell you that your 5-year-old girl could say she's a 5-year-old boy and you as the parent can't do anything about it by law, guess what? Who's taking away your precious fence that you're sitting on? Not us. Not us. Is that right?
And that's real. And sadly, too many people don't want to look at it that way. But it is. And we're going to give some examples of that, actually. Let's look at a glimpse at what a Biden presidency just might be like. Okay? I want to give you just a glimpse.
Now, keep in your mind, while we're going through these examples, okay, what Jim Caviezel was talking about. He was talking about a time for choosing, okay, and whether or not you're going to surrender for the sake of peace. But it will require your surrender. Listen to this stuff.
Michael Brown, he wrote an article in LifeSite News. He basically was talking about Biden's presidency. He's going to ramp up persecutions for those who oppose the LGBT agenda. Now, keep this in mind. I want to refresh your memory on a couple of past events. Remember in 2015, when Kim Davis in Kentucky, she refused to follow a court order to issue a marriage certificate for a same-sex marriage. What happened to her? She was put in jail. This is what someone on the left had to say about Kim Davis.
Now catch this.
By the way, They said, by virtue of defying the Constitution and the Supreme Court, Kim Davis is no better than those men who conceived, executed, and plotted those attacks on the World Trade Center and on the Pentagon on 9/11. Also, keep this in mind. In New York City, this was passed by de Blasio.
And we covered this a few months ago. We covered this.
Discriminatory treatment in the workplace against those who identify as transgender can result in a $250,000 fine. Now that sounds right. No one should be basically discriminated against. But what does he mean by that? Let's break it down. This is what he says. And this is according to official government website. Look it up if you think I'm lying. Their idea of what discrimination is, this would include you failing...
Real quick, Joe. You sitting on the fence. Go ahead, Joe.
Failing to use the individual's preferred name or pronoun, refusing to allow them to use the bathroom of their choice, or even sex stereotyping. I don't even know what the hell that is.
That means you call a man and a woman based on nature.
So bottom line is you will be fined, I'm not making this up, this is now in New York City, $250,000.
Now let me give you a little concrete example of this, okay? And this pertains to what we were talking about Jim Caviezel, okay? I have a friend. He's a dear friend, okay? I love him very much. He's a fence sitter, okay? He thinks I'm an extremist, okay? He's still my friend, and I love him, okay? Now, I've worked with him. We both worked in restaurants in New York City, okay, for a number of years, okay? He considers himself in the middle. You know how many times I make a mistake when I'm at work? And I say, hello, sir, how are you? And then I finally get there, and it's a woman, okay? Now, I haven't gotten in trouble for it because it's innocent, right? I'm not trying.
I get it.
I'm not trying to do anything, all right? Or I say, oh, hello, young lady, how are you? And it happens to be that it's a young man, okay, who's dressed like a young lady. Now, here's the thing. I know my friend has made that mistake also, okay? Now, he's a fence sitter and I'm not. But in New York City, if that person wanted to make a beef, I could be in a lot of trouble. Now, I know I'll be in a lot of trouble, especially if anybody in my job knew about the front line with Joe and Joe, which they do not. I keep this separate from my job, okay? But my friend sits on the fence. What happens if he loses his job? What happens if he's forced to have to grovel to that person because he misgendered them or didn't use the proper pronoun? You see what I mean about giving it a concrete example? My friend could get fined, or I could get fined $250,000 for a mistake because of them. And this is what Jim Caviezel's talking about.
Oh, but Joe Biden's a moderate. He's a centralist. No, he's not. And this is these are the questions. I have 3 questions to pose to you. If Biden does become the president, and his administration and their leftist ideas, because don't be mistaken. As Joe Biden has said out of his mouth, he said, my cabinet will be the most diverse cabinet from a gender perspective down the line in the history of America.
Well, one thing they won't be diverse on is diversity of thought. Go ahead, Joe.
I want to throw 3 questions at you, and then I think it'll spark an interesting discussion. Would quoting relevant verses from the Bible pertaining to the sin of homosexuality cross the line for a Biden administration? Would stating that there are only 2 sexes cross the line? Would denying the term marriage to a same-sex union cross the line? I say it would.
Yes. They're telling you that.
I say it would. This is where we're at. So basically, this is it. You can believe what you can believe in America right now. Just don't do it outside.
Right.
Don't even talk to your neighbor about it. You know, I have a neighbor. He's a state trooper. He listens to the show. I'm not going to mention his name. He's a friend of mine. We speak on the street. We look like when we're talking. This is America.
Right.
Right now. We're like as if, did someone hear what we just said? Why? What did I just say that's so wrong?
If you stand on a street corner around here and you loudly with another person bash the Catholic Church, you could say whatever you want. If you stand on a street corner and you criticize the idea in a conversation with another person, and the idea of so-called gay marriage in New York City, you could be arrested and fined $250,000. At that sham CNN political propaganda, LGBT propaganda meeting they had last year, where all the Democrats were there, like Julian Castro, who says, we're here to affirm you in your identity, talking about homosexuals and transgender. We're here to affirm you in that. And by the way, he threw in, we need to take away the tax exemption of the Catholic Church because the government shouldn't fund hate groups. He said that. Please go look it up. Okay? But there was a black man who thinks he's a woman who was going to ask a question. I forgot if it was Kamala or one of these others that were on the stage that referred to the person and mispronounced their name. I think mispronounced their name. Okay.
Purely, it was a mistake.
It was a mistake. And that man who thinks he's a woman, okay, looked at her and said, "You just misgendered me. That's an act of violence." You see how dangerous this is?
And that's what's going to take place in the workplace. They are going to bully you. And they're going to succeed because the government is behind them. This is what Joe Biden tweeted. He said that transgender rights are the civil rights issue of the day. And he has made it clear that one of his first legislative priorities in the event that he is sworn in as the next president will be to pass the Equality Act, which constitutes a direct threat against religious freedom.
Now, remember something about the Equality Act. That is a golden calf right now for the left. They need that to go through. And like Joe said in pointing it out, it will take away your religious liberties, meaning you're going to have to bend the knee to this.
You cannot say, as, say, a practicing Jew, listen, I believe marriage is between a man and a woman. I'm sorry. That's what my faith teaches, and I believe it. Or I'm a Catholic. That's what I believe. You can't say that anymore.
No.
In America.
An Equality Act is going to make that an illegal act. Why do you think that Gio asked in the chat room earlier about why they hate Donald Trump? Judges. You got a 5-4 majority, solid majority, because as Miscellaneous pointed out in the chat room, Roberts is irrelevant in all these things. But you now have hopefully, Gorsuch might be a little like this, but you have hopefully a 5-4 majority that's going to say to the left, okay, we understand that you want equality in some way, but you're trying to say that other people have to bow to you. Religious people we have to take away the religious rights of others because you said that their religious rights conflict with your so-called civil rights, which you may or may not have, depending on which judge you talk to. But religious freedom is in the First Amendment of the Constitution, okay? So you need the good judges in order to push back against things like this. And by the way, you mentioned the Equality Act. You know what makes me worry more about the Equality Act is not the Democrats. You know they're all going to vote for it. It's the Republicans that are going to allow themselves to get bullied. Again, time for choosing, a time not to surrender. We have a bunch of weak-kneed Republicans in the Republican Party that will allow themselves to be bullied by the left when it comes into passing this drivel. That's what's going to happen.
Also, Chuck Schumer goes on the record. He says he likes Joe Biden's plan to give youth access to sports locker rooms based on perceived gender. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said he is on board with Joe Biden's presidential campaign promise to allow youth access to sports activities, bathrooms, and locker rooms based not on their biological sex, but their preferred gender. So
that means an 18-year-old male senior in your daughter's high school who plays soccer, okay? No, who thinks he's a girl or who identifies that day as a girl is legally going to be protected when he wants to go into your 14-year-old freshman daughter's locker room who also plays soccer, okay? And undress and shower and do all those things. Now, here's again about fence sitting and choosing at this moment in time. Are you going to allow that? Are you going to allow an 18-year-old boy who's obviously confused to walk into your 14-year-old daughter's locker room and start undressing and changing and go in the shower.
And that's in every public school in America. You know, a lot of well-to-do people, even middle-class people, when you talk to people, it's always like, well, that doesn't happen here. That doesn't happen here. Well, it does now.
It does now.
You think I'm making this up? You see, this is where too many people, they compartmentalize their vote. They don't think past their hand. Or, oh, I'm not for that. Who'd you vote for?
Joe Biden.
This is ridiculous. Any parent with the scenario that Joe just laid out that's for that, I'm sorry. I vehemently disagree with you. I have a daughter. I'm not for that. I'm sorry. And I'm not wrong in saying it. This is insanity. Let's talk about some more insanity. Remember what Joe Biden said in October. That there should be zero discrimination if an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old child decides to be transgender. He also pledged in October to sign the Equality Act, which we just talked about, which would force public schools to allow biological males who identify as transgender girls into female athletics, which means you're destroying female athletics.
Right.
Because men are stronger than women physically.
Oh, don't say that too loud in public.
They simply are.
Right.
Simply are. Put a man on the girls' basketball team and see if she gets a rebound. See if she gets a rebound. It's not happening. If you have LeBron James goes into the women's NBA and sits under the boards, no one's getting a rebound but him because he's physically stronger.
The worst player in the NBA is going to be the best player in the WNBA because unlike what the feminists try to ram down your throat, there are physical differences, many physical differences between men and women. One good thing Joe brought up, I'd like to see, and I'm sure all you good people out there, you're a bunch of troublemakers too. So I want to see what happens. We mentioned a few months ago this lawsuit going on. We haven't followed it recently, so we don't know if it was resolved or not, where the girls' track team, members of the girls' track team in Connecticut, are suing the High School Athletic Association in Connecticut because they're allowing 2 boys to run in girls' track meets, thereby winning those races and costing these girls medals and trophies and championships and potential scholarships. Okay? There's a fight that's interesting to watch. From our point of view, that one I'm not going to sit on the fence, but I'll tell you one thing, I'll recline in my recliner and I'll crack open a little Johnny Walker Black and I'll watch that one unfurl because that one's going to be a fight against them. That one's not going to involve us, okay? Because that's where the feminists who want to be on the side of the girls are going to have to go against their comrades in the so-called LGBT movement who are on the side of the boys who think they're girls. J.K. Rowling has already come under fire for that. We covered it on the show before. She's no friend of ours, okay? But we use her as an example because she has come down on the side of the girls because she's a feminist, okay? And other feminists have come down on the side of the girls. And now the fighting has started. It's just kind of fun to watch. That's why we throw it out there because Joe and I, we're kind of troublemakers. That's why we do this show. And Colin said, just the facts, Joe and Joe. That's right, Colin. Just the facts. That's what we do around here. And a lot of Italian-American opinion right from the streets of Newark, New Jersey. So anyway.
Well, the last segment we want to talk about, we want to look at the culture war around the world. Why? Again, because it's coming to the front door of this country. Whether you realize it or not, in many ways, it's here. So let's talk about some things that we saw going on around the world. We're going to go to Canada first. Why? Because our producer, John Ross, is in Canada. We have a lot of viewers from Canada. Let's talk about it. Mary Wagner, she's a heroic Canadian pro-life activist.
Keep this in the back of your head in the context of what we're talking about. No surrender and time to make choices. Listen to Joe about Mary Wagner. God bless this woman.
She spent 6 years in prison for offering women alternatives to abortion in Canada. And recently she said in an interview she would do it again. Let's go to the quote. This is what she said. Anyone who recognizes that a child before birth is a human being has to ask these questions. How can we advocate for them? How can we speak for them in our country in which we are prosecuted for trying to advocate for them when they are most in need? She goes on. She said, as a youth, she realized in the light and really walking in the light of Mother Teresa, the distinction between caring about an issue and caring about a person. And ultimately, Christ is that person. He is our neighbor. This is something, when I read this, what came to mind is this, and we've said this on the show often. Saints change the world. You notice that she mentioned Mother Teresa. She's a saint, canonized saint. She was influenced by her. That's what I mean. You see, saints change the world. The world needs saints. Mary Wagner, dare I say, could very well be one. She put her money where her mouth was. She suffered. She went to jail for 6 years. That is very Christ-like. What did Christ do? He laid down his life. He was killed. He was real. It's a historic human. Whether you believe in the resurrection or not, cannot take away the fact that Jesus was a historical figure and he laid down his life and was killed for the truth. You see, Mary Wagner is acting like Christ. That's what changes the world.
Joe Resinello says on this show all the time, okay, from the very beginning of the show a couple of years ago, what we need to do is to sacrifice. We need to sacrifice something. Give up something, some time, some effort, okay? I say this not to brag, because I'm not a bragging person. I got nothing to brag about, okay? Saturday was cold. It was cold, and it was rainy, okay? And I was on my knees, all right, during the reflection of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ while we were praying the sorrowful mysteries, okay, for that decade. Now, for me, if anybody knows me, knows, and I'm one of God's laziest human beings, okay? I don't want to fight, okay? I don't want to do things like that. But you want to know, if I can do it, and that's the only reason I'm bringing it up, on my knees, in the cold, in the rain, praying to Jesus Christ through the intercession of his blessed mother for an end to this atrocity, okay? And that's nothing compared to Mary Wagner. Mary Wagner sacrificed 6 years of her life over time. It's been in spots, I think, like maybe 6 months in jail here or 3 months in jail there, but a total of 6 years of her life for the truth that abortion murders God's children in the womb. That's a hero, Joe Resinello. You're right. She could very well become a saint. What is the common thread of all the saints? Sacrifice. Self-sacrificing love. That's the common thread of all the saints. Mary Wagner could very well become a saint, but she is an example, again, of number one, making the right choice, making a choice, and it's the right one, and B, not surrendering to the Justin Trudeau's of the world, and the Gavin Newsoms of the world, and the Andrew Cuomo's of the world, and the Phil Murphys of the world. Don't surrender to them. That's what we need to do. That woman is a fighter. That woman is a culture warrior.
We're going to stick with Canada. Canadians urged to join Ottawa protest against conversion therapy ban. Listen to this. Known as the conversion therapy ban, the bill is C6. You Canadians who are our viewers probably know about
well
it.
Familiar with it.
Will make it a crime punishable by 5 years in jail to give minor Canadians help to overcome same-sex attraction or gender confusion, or to remove a minor from Canada to seek such help. Christian psychotherapists warned that this bill is totally totalitarian and that its ultimate goal is to silence the Christian church in Canada. It is to silence us from talking. This is what the Christian psychotherapist had to say. Here are the 5 offenses which you would be punished under the law by Bill C6.
You got to get a load of this and listen to these 5 offenses. Now, this is what we're talking about, okay? Who's in the chat room? Miscellaneous in the chat room said, the leftist attack on the man and the breakup of the nuclear family has landed us where we are, an immoral society. Because this is the reason for this. Miscellaneous is number one, to force people to bend the knee to the diabolical agenda. But yes, you're right, to break up the family. It is a direct attack on the family. But listen to what they're saying are offenses under this bill, Joe.
Causing a child to undergo conversion therapy, removing a child from Canada to undergo conversion therapy abroad, causing a person to undergo conversion therapy against his or her will, profiting from providing conversion therapy and advertising to offer conversion therapy. 5 years in prison. 5 years in prison. Keep this in mind. 20 years ago, if a 14-year-old boy said that he wanted to be a girl and was petitioning to get puberty-blocking drugs, you couldn't do that in America. It was illegal. Most probably, that child would be recommended to get some type of psychological counseling. Now, in Canada, you go to prison for it.
That's right.
By the way, expect that to happen here shortly. That's why we're bringing it up.
That's right.
It's here.
And think about the way they do things in Canada. No offense to you Canadians out there. The legislation, now think about this. The legislation defines a child as a person under the age of 18 years, although the liberals have lowered the age of consent for anal sodomy to 16 years of age. These people are not diabolical. They don't have a heavy diabolical influence when they're trying to push this stuff. Justin Trudeau would sign this stuff into law, given the opportunity. The idea that they're usurping your natural rights as parents to ram through their agenda so that they could form your child in their image, because that's what it's all about. Remember, they criticize you as a parent because you want to form your child according to your worldview. They say that's not legitimate. Why do your children have to listen to you? I don't know. They're my children. If they want to make a choice different after 18 years old, knock yourself out. I think I'll form them well enough that won't happen, okay? But here's where the hypocrisy. But they want to form your kids too. They don't want to not form your children. They're not looking to liberate your child from something. They're trying to form your child in the way they want to see your child formed, which is really not formed at all, because that's the type of citizen that they want. They want a lost, confused individual who's easily controlled and manipulated, because then that person is going to become their slave. Why don't people get this? Why people need to have this repeated over and over again is beyond me. That's what they want. They're not liberating anybody. They're not freeing anybody from anything. They're putting the parents in jail, and they're going to make a slave out of the child. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Our last story from around the world, and again, this is the culture war around the world. Why are we talking about it? Because it's coming to a theater near you. UK court. Children under 16 are too young to consent to transgender transition. Now, that's good news.
Right.
But why are we bringing it up? A lot of good things came out of this hearing. I can't even believe that such a discussion would even be in front of the High Court in the UK, but it is. This is the world we live in today. The English High Court of Justice ruled that puberty-blocking drugs are experimental treatments, and that for the most part they cannot be given to children attempting to transition to become a member of the opposite sex without having recourse to the courts. That's not what Joe Biden said. He said he'd affirm an 8-year-old to transition on TV. The ruling decreed that in order for children to give consent to being treated with puberty-blocking drugs, they would have to properly understand the immediate and long-term effects, including, get this is what this is about. At least they had the sense to put it down. Including the correlation between puberty-blocking drugs and cross-sex hormones, potential loss of fertility, as well as the unknown physical consequences of taking puberty-blocking drugs, and the fact that the evidence base for this treatment is yet highly uncertain.
Right.
And you're going to give this to a child? An adult is going to affirm an 8-year-old? A politician on television who, for the most part, could very well be the president of the United States is going to say to a mother that you've made a good choice, that your 8-year-old is going to change sexes and you're affirming them?
If I was the president of the United States, I'd have her arrested. I'd have that mother arrested and say there's something wrong with you. That's a young boy, and you're telling your young boy to become a young girl. Are you smoking crack? Maybe you are. Maybe you're on drugs. Maybe we need to pray for you because you're doing some sort of hallucinogenic drugs or something like that.
At least
But
you'd have
that's-
an excuse.
But remember, Joe Biden is so in the tank, and the reporter asked him, Mr. Biden, this was before the election, Mr. Biden, how many genders are there? At least 3.
Dude, I can't even.
You can't make that up. But see, that's
dude-
actually funny because the left is saying there's like 153. But he had to at least seem like he was hip. You know what I mean? Joe Biden's always got to be hip. Well, there's at least 3. Okay? You got to check.
Dude, it's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing, but just to put a finer point on this story, because again, we have to give you a concrete example, all right? And because these are people too. See, our problem with the left is we understand there's a lot of people out there. Everybody has a lot of different roads in life, a lot of which has been affected by some very, very, very hard circumstances, okay? There's not judgment here, okay? But the problem with the left is when you're talking about wanting to transition, or let's say, if you want to, like in the prior story about conversion therapy, I thought everything was about choice. I thought everybody has a choice to do whatever they want. So if somebody has a same-sex attraction when they're 16, and then they realize that what they did was wrong and they don't want that same-sex attraction anymore, should they not have the choice to go to somebody who's offering them services to reverse their same-sex attraction? I thought it was all about choice and freedom. That's what you hear from the godless left. Obviously, it's not about choice, because what they're doing is they're denying that person what they want, which is to revert back to a natural sexual attraction, which is to a person of the opposite sex. But I bring that up because just to give this a concrete, to put a face on this, okay, and to leave you with this. This is what this young woman said. Did you catch this part? All right, this young woman, Miss Kira, quote, Quincy Bell. She's 23 now, okay? Now look at what she went through. She began taking puberty blockers when she was 16. She was injected with testosterone when she was 17.
Oh, my God.
Okay? And she had a mastectomy when she was 20. So that essential part of her female anatomy was removed at the age of 20. Okay? The Daily Mail reported, quote, she claimed she was treated like a guinea pig at the clinic and said the doctors, now you got to catch this, that doctors failed to carry out a proper psychiatric assessment and should have challenged her more over her decision to transition to a male as a teenager. Bell is now transitioning back to a woman, thank God. Commenting on the process, and this is the key, Bell said, I was allowed to run with this idea that I had, almost like a fantasy, as a teenager, and it has affected me in the long run as an adult. It was heartbreaking to realize I had gone down the wrong path. Now remember, it's all about choice. That's what we're told. It's you could choose, you could choose, you could choose. Well, they don't want Miss Bell to choose. In fact, they hate the fact that she's choosing to go back to being what she is by nature, a woman. Or a father who's saying, or standing up saying, you're not giving my kid puberty blocking drugs. What are you, smoking crack? Or all these examples where people are fighting back. But again, what are these examples of? What were we talking about? People who have made correct choices and are not going to surrender to the oligarchs in this world. They are not going to surrender to this godless ideology. They realize, as Miss Bell did, she said it, not our words, her words. I was on the wrong path. I want to go back. I mean, sounds like the prodigal son to me. You know what I mean? Aren't we supposed to be there to help her? She's saying I was on the wrong path. Can you help me come back? Sure, but they're making it illegal for me to help her, or for Joe to help her, or for you to help her, or for anybody to help her. No, she made a choice. She's got to stay with it now. Again, why are they refusing to respect her right to choose and to have, let's say, in her case, she wants to go back. In the other case, they want therapy. There are therapists out there, very successful therapists, from my understanding and my reading. Conversion therapy works. That's why they want it banned, because it works. People actually transition back. They convert back to their natural attraction, because what they find in most of these cases, particularly amongst gay men, is a very ruptured relationship with their father, a bad father relationship that affected them, and they developed a same-sex attraction. So what these therapists do, part of what they do, is they reaffirm that man in his manhood. In other words, it's not, you just show them pictures of Playboy centerfolds, or, you know what I mean, or naked women. No, it's not about that. They're not coerced. They're not beaten. They're not locked in a room like the way the left tries to protect. They're reaffirmed in their manhood, okay? And they develop an attraction to women. It works. That's why the left hates it. That's why they hate it. So I think it was a pretty good conversation. I think it was a necessary one. No?
Well, it's here, people. All these things are not like figments of our imagination. These are things that are happening here as well as happening around the world. Expect more of them. And by the way, this is what America has chosen in many, many parts of the country. What is it? 80 million votes, so-called votes. I think the election was rigged. That's my personal opinion. They stuffed the ballot box with a bunch of bogus mail-in ballots that if they actually audited, they would be thrown out. I'm sorry, I just digressed. But the point is, a large swath of this country voted for this, whether you realize it or not. It's coming to your front door. It's here.
Right. And we need to remember, we have to make the proper choices. There is no fence sitting, and we will not surrender. I don't care. I personally don't care. And I'm not one of God's bravest human beings, but I don't care. I'm not surrendering to them. I'd rather blow my brains out than bend my knee to them. In other words, I'm never going to bend my knee to them, ever. In other words, and the more people that start standing up and saying that, okay, and holding politically those people accountable who claim to be on our side, then the faster we can start to turn things around. Most importantly, let's start bending our knee to the one we need to bend it to, which is Jesus Christ. Start, as Joe always recommends, start going to adoration. Spend an hour in front of the Blessed Sacrament. Go to confession. Give Jesus your sins, okay? And make that a regular practice. Go receive Jesus in the Eucharist. Go to Mass. Or, every day if you can, or obviously at least once a week, fulfill your obligation. Do the things necessary to purify yourself, and then we'll all be able to fight this battle more effectively. And ultimately knowing that, our king is Jesus. Our general is Mary. There's not a shot we could lose, okay? So let's try to get into this army, okay? Let's win this battle and bring a lot of people with us, which is what it's all about. Converting people, changing their hearts and minds so that they conform their lives to the truth. That's what the show is all about. We want to thank you for joining us at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello. Please, like I said earlier, follow us on Facebook and YouTube. Like, subscribe, share. Please share, and all that fun stuff. Follow us on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. We are on Monday afternoons. You could catch us there. My church has a great station. It is a 30-day free trial subscription, and Joe and I do not receive one thin dime from that. We just love the show, and we love the lineup, and we think it's a great resource for all of us, okay? So please do that. And very importantly, please follow Holy Faith Media, Jonathan Ross, up in Canada, okay, who's our producer, who was sent to us by Almighty God so that we could get this show off the ground. And it's been off the ground, and it's moving. Thanks to Jonathan, and yes, thanks to all of you. So we're going to keep it going. We're going to keep speaking the truth. We're going to keep going into the breach. And until next week at 8 o'clock, live on social media, remember that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation, well, that's going on everywhere. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening.